at the end of the day, our name does create a sense of identity for us, first and last name. And so, when I pick up, Lauren, to your point, when I take on a man's last name, I am identifying with that relationship, with that space. Although I do feel like I can still keep my individualism, because at the end of the day, you chose me because of my individualism. And so you chose me before my name was even considered to be your last name. I think me changing my name is kind of like the icing on the cake. I don't think it's the cake itself. So, I get why, and I think it's beautiful that you are excited to like change your name. And I love that for you. I really do.
For the woman, losing her last name, since she is attached to it, she still comes from, her family, and to some degree too, she still represents that family, right? Even though at the same time she's moving and creating her own family, right? And then it seems like for the woman, in order for the bond to work, is like, I have to let go of everything in order to bond, infuse into your vision of what you want, like kind of based on like biblically. The man leaves the family, right, because he's creating his own. But when the woman leaves, she's completely devoted to giving her all of herself to him, even so much so that she loses who she is certain scriptures, I'll have to look it up, but lose who she is, and to become his, right, his helpmate, his all of that kind of stuff.
Well, actually, it never said the woman must leave her mother and father, only the man.
Right. But I mean, realistically, if you're married and you're leaving and the husband is leaving his family, you're married, then it's to assume that she's going to be leaving her family too.
Well, actually, what she is leaving from, she is, as you mentioned, and I kind of go with this, but I guess maybe we'll use a different word. I would say you were mentioning how the authority is being transferred. Technically, yes, but more so what it is, she is being transferred from her father, who is the person who has sustained her for all of her life, to now be sustained by this new individual, which is her husband. And so that is the transference that the woman is experiencing. The man, he isn't being transferred. He is taking on the role of, and I want to say this to make this make sense. It's not strange, but he is taking on the role of Abba as well, or father as well. Which the idea of father isn't, my dad, literally my father. It is the idea of I am the provider, the nourisher. That makes sense?
Yeah, the headship. Correct. And I said the headship, yeah.
So, why y'all gotta have so much control? Gee,
well, it's truly about, like, I look at the Bible, not saying that you can't learn lessons from it. And I know that people take it literally, and some people interpret things the way that they want to receive it. Like, it's so open. But looking at it from the perspective of a historical book, it makes sense in a way things are written, because back then women did not have a voice. They didn't. They just didn't.
But let me ask you.
When we talk about it on like a molecular level, that covalent bond, that ionic bond, is formed from two individual molecules coming together to form a bond. So when you look at it, there's three relationships here: the relationship with self, and then the relationship that you have together. So for me, I think for individuals that want to keep their last name, I understand from, at the end of the day, our name does create a sense of identity for us, first and last name. And so, when I pick up, Lauren, to your point, when I take on a man's last name, I am identifying with that relationship, with that space. Although I do feel like I can still keep my individualism, because at the end of the day, you chose me because of my individualism. And so you chose me before my name was even considered to be your last name. I think me changing my name is kind of like the icing on the cake. I don't think it's the cake itself. So, I get why, and I think it's beautiful that you are excited to like change your name. I love that for you. I really do. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I think it's beautiful. I will say that I don't think it's a lack of stepping into fully a relationship if you choose to keep your name or choose to hyphenate your name, just because even historically with, going back to our history as Africans, we didn't change our last names. That, to Miss Taken's point, started a lot with slavery and, taking on ownership of the other individual and claiming ownership to someone else. And so I do think that there is power in changing your last name. I do think that there's power in, wanting to.
In a Hispanic culture, they don't change names either. That's why their names end up being so long, because no, for real, it's because they do.
No, you're right.
Their family name.
Is it not?
Then a
Would
marriage
not be one of those situations where when we just talk about growth. We're growing. I love being Shantae, blah 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 blah. But it's time for me to grow into being Mrs. Shantae, blah blah blah. So I'm gonna always be that past person because she made me who I am. But now I'm stepping into Mrs. With his last name. Proudly. The badge of honor. It doesn't take away who I was in the past. I'm gonna always be that person, but it just signifies this union I've made with him, this bond I've made with him. Like I'm there to be by his side to take. I don't understand.
Right, so then my question is, if there's an issue with the last name, then why not even hyphenate? Why not we blend a name to create a whole new name? Because really names can be changed.
Because this is different.
No, listen, this is what I'm trying to say. Just being devil's advocate, right?
The devil don't need no advocate. No, I'm kidding.
Well, that's true. Right. Giving a different perspective. I'll say that. Giving a different perspective. Because me and my husband, we actually talked about this. And he said that it would have been a problem for him if I wasn't willing to change my last name. We discussed that after the fact. I didn't have an issue with doing it. But when we talked about it, he said it would be because the whole purpose of you changing your last name is then when we have our family that I'm passing on my legacy. This is my legacy from what we've created. And so having that whole last name, not changing the last name when we have kids, then what? Are they gonna have a hyphenated last name?
Not be a part of that legacy though.
Say what?
Right, it's y'all's legacy.
How
that was my point. And why not blend names together? Why not blend both last names together or come up with a whole different last? I don't know. Just to signify both of our transition from being individuals, becoming one unit, and then creating our legacy. Because the truth of the matter is that the man keeps their last name and that legacy continues for generation to generation. Whereas a woman, I do think she takes part in providing that legacy because she's helping with the child rearing, she's helping with all of those things. So why not create something different? Like I'm leaving my family, you're leaving our family, we're coming together as one. Why not create a different last name that suits both of us? Because both of us are losing in a sense that we're losing our families to come together, create one, as opposed to just the woman having to give up their last name. And again, I think that's tied to historical.
The patriarchy.
Yeah. Exactly.
I got an idea. Lauren, you and I, let's change our last name. Let's happening. Okay.
Look, I'm married already, so it don't matter.
Let me just tell you, if I find a man who I'm in love with and he takes me on as his wife, baby.
And like I said, I don't have an issue with it. I just was going along the lines of all of the things that after I started reading about what women sacrifice coming into a relationship. And then that just made me think about how, they're saying now statistics are showing that more men are wanting to get married than women. Women are more reluctant to, get married. And,
That's
because we're tired.
Wait, and then when you look at them being more reluctant, and then they also have a higher divorce rate in terms of initiating divorce, what is that? For me, that's the meat and potatoes that I'm thinking about. Like, what would make you not want to get married now, and once you marry, to initiate divorce? And for me, that led to that. Well, what is it that women are experiencing when they're in their marriage? And go ahead.
I think we're experiencing limerence, and limerence is this idea behind, they say it's obsession, but it's more of you create a fantasy around a person.
Mm-hmm.
And when you create this, and typically, you know, we see this in like the new age spirituality, you know, how there's the buzzwords, you know, soulmate, you know, twin flame, things of that nature. And I was one of those person that actually thought about those things and really was like, oh yeah, I gotta find my soulmate and so on and so forth. But what we don't realize is when we attach these things to a person, or when we have these ideas about who a person is, we tend to just look at it like, oh, this is divinely orchestrated, or oh, this is my karma. And we don't see it for what it literally is. This person may not be your soulmate. They may not be your twin flame. They may not be this amazing thing that you think they are. They're just who they are. And because we have this in the back of our mind, this magical thinking about what a person is when we met them, you know, it was love at first sight, and oh my goodness, this is my soulmate, and things of that nature. No, it wasn't. This person
was for me.
actually,
No, I'm joking. It wasn't.
I've been there. You know,
it wasn't.
But really,
it was lust at first sight. It wasn't love. It was love at first sight.
But like, what I think is really happening is that feeling that we get, that magical vibe that we get when we meet someone and we call them our soulmate. It's actually the universe's way of telling you, like, hey, check in on this, because there's something about this person that's attracting you to them that may be something within you need to fix. And so when we don't walk into it with that thought process, instead we use magical thinking and we sprinkle fairy dust on everything, like, oh, it's wonderful. We're actually telling ourselves, that's my soulmate. No, you're getting destroyed. That's not your soulmate. In fact, if you even think about soulmates, it's like, you mean to tell me that say someone's being mistreated, right? You mean to tell me that this person had been traveling around for eons, different lifetimes, just to show up like that? That's your soulmate? No, absolutely not. The thing is, God doesn't make a specific person for specific people. He just makes people, and you decide if you want to deal with that person. That's all it is. But we put this magical thinking on everything, and we go into it trying to mold them into something that they're not. And then we get married, we force it. We are forcing a square peg in a circle. We're forcing it. And then we finally have that day where we're just like, you know what?
What the hell?
I don't want to do this anymore.
This wasn't the right decision.
Right. And so now we're divorced, you know? And so I think what it boils down to is we have to, it doesn't help that Disney has made everything princess and Cinderellas and happy ever afters, you know, that doesn't help, right? And so I think what happens is we actually have a coming to moment, you know, where the cloth is taken off of our eyes, and now we're looking like, okay, well, this is not what I thought it was. And we wake up to it, and then we realize, yeah, no, I did all of this stuff, but this ain't actually what I wanted to do. In fact, I'm actually not happy here. I've never been happy here. I just lied to myself to make it work because I had this idea, this fantasy of what I wanted to see take place.
And Lauren, you made a good point with like the attachment where, you know, it's not what you thought it was, but it's exactly what it's always been. And because you've put this attachment and you've created this obsession over what your expectations were and who, you know, you've designed this person out to be, now you're with them and they're not who you designed them out to be, but in fact, they are exactly who they've always been. But because you've put this, you know, this veil over yourself, because at some point it was a choice to ignore the big red flag that just kept going over the scene. Yeah, where it was like now all of a sudden, you know, your needs are not being met so much that you're like, okay, now I choose to take the veil off, and now I'm going to look at it for what it really is. And now I'm going to finally acknowledge that this is not for me. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, the attachment is real, like where, you know, you're attaching yourself to a certain expectation that you created for someone else that's not realistic. Mm-hmm. It's not who they are. You shouldn't be putting expectations on other people anyway. And, you know, at some point you learn your lesson. Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.